What does it take to become invincible? To win over 60 deadly duels, face down entire sword schools, and still leave behind a philosophy that shapes warriors, leaders, and thinkers centuries later. This is the story of Miyamoto Musashi, not just the greatest samurai of feudal Japan, but a master strategist, artist, and philosopher whose legacy continues to influence modern minds. Stay with us as we dive into the life, battles, and mind of the man who became legend. In the late 1500s, Japan was locked in the Sengoku Warring States period, decades of near-constant civil war and clan battles. It was into this maelstrom that Miyamoto Musashi was born. In 1584, in a rural village of Harima Province, Mimasaka, under the broken sway of the Ashikaga shogunate, Musashi entered the world as the son of a low-ranking samurai, Shinmen Munasai. Legend has it his mother died giving birth to him. A grim omen, perhaps, but history shows he lived to become much more than a mere boy of the wars. From infancy, Musashi was shaped by conflict and the code of the warrior. His father taught him swordsmanship and discipline, even as Japan itself convulsed in bloody struggle. Against this backdrop, Musashi grew into a figure of almost mythic stature. He stood about 180 centimeters tall, nearly a head above the average samurai of 150 centimeters, giving him a truly imposing presence. More remarkable still was his breadth of talent. Musashi was not merely a swordsman, but a philosopher, artist, and writer. By his own later account, he never married, never cut his hair, and famously refused to enter a bath for fear of being caught unarmed. Such uncompromising habits hint at the intense, solitary character of the man. In these early days of his legend, the stage was set not just for duels on the field of battle, but for a life that would blend swordplay with Zen insight and artistry. Early life and first duels. Musashi's childhood and youth were spent on Japan's periphery and on the road. Born Shinmen Benosuke, he was raised in the Miyamoto village of Harima, now Mimasaka, by his martial father Munasai. By age 13, he was already challenging men in combat. In a famous incident recounted in his own Book of Five Rings, a 13-year-old Musashi accepted a duel from an itinerant Kashima-ryu swordsman named Arima Kihei. Using only a wooden practice sword, Bokken, the youth threw Kihei down and killed him with repeated blows to the head. This victory marked the beginning of Musashi's legend. In the years that followed, the young Ronin wandered Japan on a Musha Shugyo, warrior's pilgrimage, seeking stronger opponents. By 16, he had won a second duel against a local samurai, Tadashima Akiyama. He reputedly survived the 1600 Battle of Sekigahara as a foot soldier, though some accounts say he was actually in Kyushu at the time honing his skills. By age 21, Musashi reached Kyoto and boldly challenged the Yoshioka sword school. He defeated several of their champions, cementing his reputation as a rising master. Contemporary chronicles and later biographers agree he fought over 60 duels in total, the highest number on record, with 17 lives claimed along the way. For a teenage Ronin to rack up so many victories was astonishing. Musashi fought to win, but he fought differently. From his earliest duels, he showed a relentless focus on beating an opponent rather than on ritual. He arrived at Ganryu Island in 1612 for the climactic duel with the famed swordsman Sasaki Kojiro, armed only with a curved wooden oar carved into a bokken. When the contest began, Musashi swiftly struck down Kojiro with a single vertical blow, crushing his skull. Legend says Kojiro, vexed by Musashi's late arrival, abandoned formality in rage. This victory at age 29 made Musashi a household name. He had proven himself peerless, not by courtly ceremony, but by cunning and technique. A unique warrior. Several traits set Musashi apart from other samurai. He never pledged allegiance to a lord. He was a masterless Ronin, which gave him freedom but also left him to carve his own path in a rigid world. He reportedly had only one teacher, his father, and he constantly questioned tradition. In his later writings, he complained that many schools were too caught up in fancy postures and ceremonies, preferring deadly practicality. Unlike most of his peers, Musashi championed wielding two swords, his custom Niten Ichi Ryu, or two heavens, one style. He practiced fighting with a katana in each hand. He reasoned that in close quarters, a samurai often had only his short sword, wakizashi, so real mastery meant fluency with any blade. Throughout his life, he insisted students train with both weapons simultaneously to gain that adaptability. Musashi also lived simply and ascetically. Historian Kamiko Tadashi notes, for his entire life, Musashi never took a wife, cut his hair, or entered a bath. He was known to scrub himself with sand in the field instead of water, so he'd never be vulnerable. This harsh discipline echoed his mental approach. He never rested easy, always on guard. Yet he was not just a brute. Musashi was a polymath. He was a highly accomplished painter and calligrapher, devoted to the arts. In fact, he strove to master Japanese calligraphy as fiercely as the sword. He studied Zen Buddhism as well. In 1611, he spent time learning Zazen meditation at the Myoshinji Temple in Kyushu, blending warrior training with spiritual practice. He famously advised students to become acquainted with every art and to see 10,000 things from one principle, reflecting his belief in broad learning. In short, Musashi's character was a powerful mix of strength and intellect. He was a towering, scarred figure on the battlefield, yet quiet and perceptive off it. He picked up lessons from each experience. His peers described him as both fierce and serene, a deadly warrior who would later be revered as Kensei, sword saint. This complex duality, artist and killer, philosopher and brawler, made Musashi unlike any other samurai of his age. The warrior's path. Musashi's life continued in a nomadic warrior's rhythm. After the Yoshioka episode, he traveled widely, perfecting his style. In 1612, he finally squared off with Sasaki Kojiro on Ganryu Island, ending the duel as described. Thereafter, he served various daimyo, feudal lords, as a swordmaster and advisor. Some records suggest he fought under Tokugawa vassals in the Osaka campaigns, always on the winning side, though he never took official military rank. He even taught swordplay to generals like Mizuno Katsunari of Kumamoto. Throughout this period, he was known simply as Musashi, the undefeated swordsman. By the 1630s, Musashi's wanderings settled. He spent his final years in Kumamoto as guest master to the Hosokawa clan. In a thatched hut overlooking the rain-soaked hills, the aged warrior set aside the katana to become a writer. Between 1643 and 1645, Musashi composed Go-Rin no Sho, the Book of Five Rings, a masterful treatise on strategy, swordsmanship, and the warrior's way. Reflecting on decades of battle, he distilled his philosophy into 5 scrolls: ground, water, fire, wind, void, each named for an element of Buddhist cosmology. These scrolls weave history and metaphor. The earth ground. Book opens with a house-building analogy for martial fundamentals. Water describes his Niten Ichi Ryu techniques. Fire addresses timing and strategy on the battlefield. Wind critiques rival schools, and the void explores the ideal warrior's spirit. Musashi's own summary was terse and uncompromising. Think only of cutting the enemy, he writes, decrying any needless flourish. Every lesson ends with the stern admonition, you must study this deeply. Core principles. Musashi's central precepts can be summed up in short maxims, and his own Earth chapter begins with 9 guiding rules for any student. Key examples include: do not think dishonestly. Never delude yourself. Face every situation with clear eyes. The way is in training. Mastery comes only through relentless practice and dedication. Become acquainted with every art. Learn broadly from all disciplines, not just swordsmanship. Pay attention even to trifles. Notice the smallest details in strategy and movement. Each principle reflects Musashi's overarching philosophy: constant learning, rigorous self-honesty, and attention to reality. In his own words, a warrior must study deeply, not just read, but live the strategy. He urged students to see multiple steps ahead, to train their intuition until they could instinctively react. Many of Musashi's aphorisms from Go-Rin no-Sho sound as much like modern leadership advice as medieval battlecraft. For instance, he warned that perception is strong and sight weak, meaning one must learn to sense the whole field of battle rather than fixate on one part. He also wrote that in duels, if you make your opponent flinch, you have already won, a reminder to seize initiative and resolve conflict early. Though written by a swordsman, these teachings clearly aim at winning any contest of will. Modern application. Miyamoto Musashi's life and lessons reach far beyond 17th-century samurai culture. Even today, his image looms large in strategy and self-improvement circles. Business executives, entrepreneurs, and coaches frequently cite the Book of Five Rings. As one source notes, the text is considered a must-read for leaders in both civilian and military roles, applicable to corporate and competitive arenas. Managers invoke Musashi to emphasize focus and adaptability. Athletes study his advice on mindset and timing. Even military analysts have compared his combat principles to modern tactics. Musashi's concept of mushin, no mind, in the Void chapter, parallels what psychologists call a flow state, complete immersion and clarity during peak performance. His counsel to control yourself resonates in personal development. As he famously said, "There is nothing outside of yourself that can ever enable you to get better. Everything is within." In other words, mastery of battle, or business, or life always begins with mastering one's own fear, focus, and passion. For many people today, Musashi exemplifies the archetype of the warrior philosopher. Statues of him still stand in modern Kumamoto and Tokyo. His face appears in films, comics, and books. Companies named after him teach swordsmanship techniques, and his tactics have titles like strategy and personal development. This is fitting, for Musashi himself saw no distinction between life's domains. He advised his students to practice the way of strategy every day of his life. In the final analysis, whether as a statue silhouette under a pine tree or the handwritten words of Go-Rin no-Sho, Musashi's legacy endures. He is remembered not just as an undefeated duelist, but as a thinker who sought truth in every stroke of a brush and sword. His journey from a village boy to Kenshi, sword saint, offers a timeless story, one of constant learning, fierce self-mastery, and the artful balance of force and wisdom.